Chevre, was macht ihr? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today was Yud Gimel Tishrei, the Yemei Lula of the Rebbe Marash, the fourth HaBerachah Rebbe, whose famous saying was, "The Welt sagt, am Mekenisch Arunte, geht na Rebbe, aber ich sag, Melchatchila Rebbe." He was the Rebbe that said that the world says first you go under, if you're dealing with a situation, a gate, or an obstacle, but I say go over in the first place. We spoke about this many times, so I'm not going to elaborate, but since today was Yud Gimel Tishrei, so therefore we have to mention that today was the Yemei Lula of the Rebbe Marash, and his attitude, his approach of going first over, which means we don't reckon with the limitations, we're not defined by our limits, we break out and we're able to achieve great things. This is not a proper explanation, but nevertheless, may the Sukkos of the Baal Yemei Lula, the Rebbe Marash, Melchatchila Rebbe, bring blessings to every single Jew in whatever circumstance he finds himself. Any limitations, hindrances, or things that are preventing him from fulfilling whatever he wants to fulfill in a good way should be nullified, and we should see blessings in all areas of our life. We'll start, today is already, tonight, it's already Le'erev Chag Sukkos, and we're in Parshas HaBerachah. So what are the connections between all these things? Now, let's start with the prayer, which is directly connected with the pasuk from this week's parsha, and that's what we say before Hoidu, before the Kabbonis. We say, "Aval anachnu amcha b'nei b'risecha," but we who are your b'nei b'risecha. "Aval anachnu amcha b'nei b'risecha b'nei Avraham ha'yavcha shenishbat li b'har ha'meliyah zer yitzchak yichidei sheneked al gabe ha'mizbeach ad es Yaakov bincha b'chirecha sheme'avoscha she'afta yisoi u'misumchascha she'samachta boi karasa shmei Yisrael v'shurun." So here it says that our nation, the Jewish nation, was chosen by Hashem. You loved Avram. We are the children of Avram, the children of Yitzchak, the congregation of Yaakov. And because of your great love and the great joy you received from us, you called us Yisrael and Yeshurun. Karasa Shema Yisrael v'Yeshurun. So it's besides for the name of Am Yisrael, we're called Am Yisrael, we're also called Yeshurun. So in this week's Parsha, there's a pasuk which is directly related to Chag Sukkos, and we'll see a new idea in the concept of Achdus Yisrael, the unity of the Jewish nation. And the pasuk says as follows: Vayihi b'Yeshurun melech. That says in Parshas HaBerachah, Kapitel Lamed Gimel, pasuk Hey. Vayihi b'Yeshurun melech b'Hisasav Roshei Om Yachad Shiftei Yisrael. So Rashi says it's talking about Hashem. Vayihi b'Yeshurun melech. Hashem is the acknowledged king of Yeshurun, which means of the Jewish nation. Now, one of the reasons why we're called Yeshurun is because we're straight. We once spoke about this concept of a compliant citizen, an honest person. Like I said many times, the people driving the cars that have to be hooked up with some sort of radio that tells them where the cops are, those are the people that don't want to follow the rules. But people that follow the rules are usually not bothered. They're not interested to know where there's cameras and not cameras, where there's the police or not the police. They know they have to follow the rules. So that's a straight person. He's not looking for ways how to scam, how to cheat, how to make a con. He's straight. That's called a compliant citizen. And in these words, b'Yeshurun melech, Rashi says, Tamid oil malchusei aleim, which, as a Hasidic Jew, you could bring a whole night just in these words. We're saying Hashem is melech. Where is he king? B'Yeshurun, over the Jews. And why? Tamid oil malchusei aleim, because the Jews always accept Hashem's authority. So that means we're all compliant citizens. And in Chassidus, there's a lashon, which I used to hear from my mashpiyim. It's brought down from a Maimer, Chassidic discourse of the Friedrich Rebbe. A Yid is a Kabbalah Selnik, and a Kabbalah Selnik is a Jew. This defines a Yid. A Yid is a Kabbalah Selnik, and a Kabbalah Selnik is a Yid. What's a Yid? A Kabbalah Selnik. And what does it mean, a Kabbalah Selnik? A compliant citizen for Hashem. And this is what Rashi says over here. This is the source. Vayihi b'shurun melech. Amongst the Yidden, the Eibishter is melech, because we, umalchusei beratzoin, kibu aleim, we accepted his authority, willingly, and therefore he's the king over us. Now the pasuk continues, Be'esasef roshei om, yachad shiftei Yisrael, which means, Rashi says two explanations on he's the king, Be'esasef roshei om, when they're gathered. Roshei Om, Rashi says over here, does not refer to the leaders of the nation, but it means every Yid, when they're gathered. I'm going to read inside the Rashi. At every gathering, the total number of their gathering, of their assembly, Roshei Kamei Kisisa Sarosh. What does it mean over here? Roshei, it doesn't mean the heads, like the captains or the princes, the Nesiim of the tribes who gathered. No. What does it mean, the heads? It means the heads of everyone. Like it says, Kisisa Sarosh. When we counted the Yidden, Ruyim Elu Shavarchem. When they're all gathered together, then they're fitting to be blessed. Okay, that's one pshat. So, according to this pshat, this pasuk, Vayihi b'shurun melech, is coming after V'zeis HaBerachah, after the parsha starts, a couple of psukim before, with V'zeis HaBerachah, Asher Berech Moshe. This is the blessings that Moshe blessed the Jews before he passed away. So why does he give the bracha now? Besides for the fact that Moshe is passing on, but it's also because Bis Asif Roshei Om Yachad Shiftei Yisrael, because since all the Jews were gathered, it's an opportune time to bless them. They're worthy. When the Yidden are gathered, they're fitting for me to bless them. Then it says Dover Acha Bis Asif Bis Asfam Yachad Baguda Achas V'Sholim Beinayem Hu Malkom V'Loi Kishesh Machlokas B'Neim. So this is a novel interpretation. That over here, the Beis Asif, Roshei Om Yachad Shiftei Yisrael, is not referring to the general narrative of this parsha, of Moshe's blessing, but what is it referring to? The beginning of this pasuk. Vayihi b'shurun melech. When is Hashem king? Beis Asif Roshei Am Yachad Shiftei Yisrael, when the Jews are united. That's when Hashem is king. When there's a united kingdom, that's a reflection of the king. So over here, we have to understand why. And if the nation is not united, why does that take away from the kingship of the king? What is diminished in the potency, so to speak, of a king if the nation is not united? So we'll understand that by understanding another key word over here, where he says, "Besasom yachad baguda achas v'sholom beinayim hu malkom." When there's peace amongst them, he's the king. What does it mean, peace? How do we achieve peace when we have opposing views? So to understand this, what it means, peace, I thought maybe we should learn a bit of Tanya. And that's in Igeres HaKodesh, Simin Yud Beis. The Alter Rebbe says the following. I'm going to read you a piece of the Alter Rebbe's Tanya in Igeres HaKodesh Yud Beis, and also a bit of a piece in Tezvov. And over here he says that we'll understand whatever he's talking about over there. Al Pish Mashom Azal, according to what our sage just said, Al Posuk, on the Posuk, Oiseh Sholem B'Mereimov. He makes peace in high places. So there's a pasuk. It says, "Oiseh Sholem B'Mereimov." Hashem is the one who makes peace in high places. And the Razal say on this, "Ki Michol Sar Shalmayim," the angel Michol is the prince of Chesed. The Gavriel, he's the prince of water, which is kindness as we'll soon see, and Gavriel, which is Sashal Mayim, and Gavriel, which is the prince of fire. The ein mechaben zeh, and they don't extinguish one to the other. They don't extinguish each other. And then he explains why chesed is water and why fire is gvura. That means they're opposites. We'll soon explain. I just want to get to it. But he says, how is there peace? But there's a source that is higher than Michal and Gavriel, and the Eibishter makes peace between them. How? Ayidei gilui shemizgala ben ha'ara rabba v'ashpa atzuma ma'oir ein soif baruchu asher kishmoi keinu she'ein b'chinas midah chaz v'sholem. In other words, like this. Let's take a simple example. We have a king. That's what he says. We have a sar shel mayim and a sar shel eish. We have somebody that's called the attorney general. I hope I'm right. But let's say he's the one that represents the defender of the public, of the nation. That's the sar shel chesed, and that's the sar shel mayim. Then we have the sar shel eish. We have the one who's the prosecutor general, the one who always looks to make the laws stricter, more control, etc. Now the question is, the truth is, they both have opposite personalities. We have the one person in a court case. You have a lawyer and you have a prosecutor. You have one person who's the lawyer. He's trying to see the defendant in the good light. And he's there always to defend the defendant, to see the positive and to try to get him innocent. That's his job. And he has a personality where he believes that the system could sometimes make mistakes, and until we follow every single a loophole, so to speak, but also according to the law, until we leave no stone unturned, we can't consider him guilty until he's proven guilty. In other words, innocent until proven guilty, and use everything within the law to try to prove that he's innocent. That's a lawyer. Because a kuk mit a gute sar shel chesed, a prince of chesed. Then you have the sar shel gvura. He's the opposite. He thinks that the law is too lenient in general. He thinks too many people get off too easily. Excuse me. He thinks the streets are not safe. So therefore, even though he understands, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a drink. HaBerachah, so even though he understands that there's a law, and he also understands innocent until proven guilty, but he looks mit a schlechte, because that's his job. To do his job properly, he always has to assume the worst and try to push that angle, that perspective. And that means he's doing his job well, because that's what his job is. You know, like they say, good cop, bad cop. When you have the combination, then things go well. Now the question is, the truth is, the Sar Shel Chesed is called Sar Shel Chesed because that's who he is. He's a Sar Shel Chesed. The Sar Shel Gvura is called Sar Shel Gvura because that's who he is. They have opposing personalities, polar opposites. And that's why one is called Mayim and one is called Eish. Besides what he says in the Perek, why? But they're two opposites. And fire and water cannot coexist. So let's see. They really hate each other. There can't be peace. So we say no. Oisa Shalom b'Mireimov. How is the peace? Because there's something greater. There's something far, far greater than them. There's the king. And the king means you're in the service of something which is completely incomparable to you. Totally, as we spoke many times, the level of the king, Mishichmei L'mayla Gavoya. There's the king and everyone else. And everyone else is equally nullified to the king. So now the question is, how do you view your right to exist? How do you view your virtue, your value, your worthiness? So the Shai Levetz, he says, he Tzitze hebt sich an von dein Zior, Tzitze hebt sich an von dein Midde, or wie bald hast du da Melech. In other words, if you look at yourself, what's my claim to fame? I'm such a nice person. Let's say I'm the Sasha Chesed. What's my claim to fame? I'm such a nice person. I have care, and I have compassion, and I have mercy, etc., etc. And how do I look at the Sag Shel Gvura? He's such a limited person. He's so petty. He's so strict. He's so square. He's such a nerd. Lighten up a bit. Have kindness. Have empathy. That's how the Sasha Chesed looks at the Sasha Gvura. If his worthiness is based on his personality. Now let's look at the Sasha Gvura. How does he look at the Sasha Chesed? He looks at the Sasha Chesed as a weak person. He looks at the lawyer, the defendant, as one of the reason why the world has gone mad. Because they get off the hook. So many criminals are walking the streets and get off scot-free. And whose fault is it? Your fault. Because you're too soft. Because you're too weak. You're a people pleaser. Maybe think about the welfare. That the streets have to be more safe. And sometimes you have to be hard and indifferent and uncaring because you have to look at the bigger picture. So the Sar Shel Gvura, the prosecutor, he looks at the lawyer as a weakling, etc. Now, how do they make peace? Because they look at their right to exist, their worthiness, not because of their form, not because of their definition, not because of their personal value. They start with a whole different reckoning. Why do I exist? Because there's a king. Why do I exist? Because there's a country. For the smooth operating of a country, there has to be a lawyer and there has to be a prosecutor. There has to be both. For the same reason that I exist and I am important and I am worthy, he is worthy. In the same exact way. Because it's not about me, it's not about him, it's about the country and it's about the king. The king is running a country. He's the one who gave me my position because I'm good for my position. He gave him that position because he's good for that position. It's about the king and it's about the country. So in other words, now we understand what Rashi says over here. Rashi says that if there's no peace, he's not their king. Only when it's Besasef Rosh Yami Yachad Shifte Yisrael, when there's Hisasum Yachad Baguda Achas B'Sholim B'Neim Hu Malcolm. If not, he's not the Melech. And this is, by the way, what the Alter Rebbe explains, that this level that we're talking about is really the level of Teferes, because Teferes has many colors. And that's what it means, Shalom. Shalom doesn't mean that they both have to become nullified. As well, Uis Chesed and Uis Gvura, like we delete them. Yeah, there's something greater that overpowers them and causes them to be deleted or annihilated or non-existent. No! The point is they both exist and they complement each other. And that's what the Alter Rebbe explains in Tes Vav when he talks about Teferes. In Yud Beis in Geras HaKodesh he says that it comes from Teferes and it has two colors. But in Tes Vav he makes it even more clear. He says, what does Teferes, what does beauty mean? Beauty means that big day Teferes, like a beautiful cloth that has Gvonim Harbe, many colors, Mu'ravim, B'derech Shu Teferes V'noi. Many colors, multi-colorful, multifaceted, and that makes it beautiful. Mashenkim beged begoven echad l'shayich b'loshon Teferes. If something's one-dimensional, it's not possible to call it beautiful. So now we understand also over here. What does it mean when we say over here that there's a shalom b'neim and then it's Malcolm? That's when they continue to exist. The king needs a prosecutor. The king needs a lawyer. The king needs every member of his team. And that shows that the king is potent. They all recognize that the king is a far, far greater person, that there's something far, far greater than each of them. They go out of their midah. Midah means their limitations. They're confined view as they see themselves and their confined definition, and they attach themselves to something which has an aspect of infinity, which every time when there's a revelation of infinity, it causes whatever's lower to become equalized. But they work together, they still exist. And that's what it means, shalom. And that's what Rashi is speaking about over here. This is the barometer of a king. The barometer of a king is if his vision is shared by everyone, and that means that he's truly a king. Now there's another pasuk. I remember learning a mimer, a discourse in Ayin Beis, a famous hemshech of the HaBerachah, but I don't have the time to look it up right now. But he explains this concept also with another verse. Bereivam hadras melech. When is the glory of the king? When it's a great nation. And he explains in the mimer that over the meaning of the verse doesn't mean great, the huge, in the sense of quantity, but it means huge in the sense of quality, i.e., that it's made up of all kinds. Like we say, diversity. In other words, only in a country which has a true diversity, and the more the merrier, then we see the beauty of the nation. It's the same thing with an army. Like we spoke many times, we have a sniper, we have a jeep driver, we have a scuba diver, we have a tankist, we have a paratrooper, we have a pilot, etc., etc., etc. Only when you have an army, we have a specialist to make scrambled eggs. We have a specialist who's a specialist in the maintenance of the lavatory, etc., etc. Only an army that has everyone's a specialist in their own area, and we have everything is so precise that there's every single situation that you could think of. There's someone in the army that could deal with it. That makes it a special army. Same things over here. The Rebbe Rashab explains in that Maimer, Bereivam hadras melech. Only when we have the multitude of different functions, different personalities, different agendas, so to speak, different dispositions, different temperaments, and they all merge, working together for one cause, then we see the greatness of the king. So this tells us now, this Rashi, that this idea of Ahavas Yisrael is on two levels. There's one level of Ahavas Yisrael, the first part of Rashi, which is B'sasav Rashayom, when they gathered, Barcheinu Avinu Kulam Ke'echad. That's what it says all over. That the explanation, that there's nothing that the Father loves more than to see all his children united, and therefore Barcheinu Avinu Kulam Ke'echad. When all of us are united, that's when we get the blessings. As the Tzemach Tzedek said, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. Aleph means Achdus, Beis is Bracha. And he also said Gimel, if it's Geos, which is ego, arrogance, then comes Daled, which is not a good thing. Poverty, Chas v'Shalom. So, this is all over explained, similar to Alter Rebbe I just mentioned in chapter 32 of Tanya. He says, U'barcheinu avinu. When do we get blessings? Kulona Ke'echad, when we're all together. So that idea of Achdus is number one, it's better for us. You want a blessing to Hashem? Love a Jew and the Eibishter will love you. Draw another Jew closer, the Eibishter will draw you closer. Do a favor for a Jew and the Eibishter will do you a favor. So that's the idea of Av Echad U'Kolonu. We have to realize we all have the same Father, and there's nothing that a father loves more than to see his children united. But a father remains a father. Chas v'Shalom, may never be in a case where the children are not united. But here comes a different, deeper, in a certain sense, a deeper word. He's saying that we have to have Ahavas Yisrael not only for our benefit, and not only because the father likes him more, but because if we don't have the Ahavas Yisrael, then he's not king. It doesn't say over here that he's less of a king. The Lashon of Rashi is B'esasav yachad b'aguda achas b'sholem b'neim hu malkom. That's when he's the king, when there's peace. V'loi kishesh machlokes b'neim. So this idea that there will be disunity amongst the subjects, amongst Am Yisrael, that causes him to be less king, or no king, or less of a king. So it's a whole new aspect and a whole new dimension. And this adds to the idea of how Sukkos comes after Rosh Hashanah, and the whole Aveda of Tishrei is how he accepted Hashem as Melech. Comes Parshas V'zei HaBerachah, And the Chag Sukkos brings out another idea of Melech. Not only that Melech is the idea that I personally accept his yoke, my personal Avodas Hashem, which is mainly Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim, is focused more on self, and how I become a compliant citizen, and that I proclaim my loyalty and devotion, etc. But here comes Sukkos. We see another dimension of Malchus, of Hashem's Melucha, and that is, if you accept the king as the greater authority, then you have to live with Ois Shalom B'Mereimov. If the king is a king, then he brings peace amongst all his nation, all his followers, all of his subjects. So it gives you a whole new chayas, a new enthusiasm, a new perspective in the whole idea of Avos Yisrael. And the same thing is true concerning Hasidim, concerning the Rebbe, which I don't want to elaborate about that. Now let's go to Sukkos. Now these other connections to Avos Yisrael, that's Leini Kol Yisrael, the pasuk ends off over there. Now Sukkos, as everyone knows, the central theme of Sukkos is Achdus. The Rebbe spoke about it many times. I'm not going to elaborate. The idea that the Gemara learns out from the pasuk, B'Sukkos Teishu Shivas Yomim. We should be in the Sukkos for 7 days. Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshu b'Sukkos. Every resident of Eretz Yisrael shall live in these huts, in the booths. And the Gemara learns out from this, Ruyim Kol Yisrael Leishav B'Sukkah Achas. The entire nation is worthy to sit in one sukkah, because even though there's many laws concerning the measurements of the sukkah and there's heights and the walls, etc., there's all these different laws, but you can build the sukkah as gigantic as you want. And about that, there's no law, and this is what it means. Ruyim Kol Yisrael Leishav B'Sukkah Achas. Since a sukkah could be gigantic, and in general, a sukkah is a big makif. There's levush, mozen, bayis, and then a sukkah. So we have the concept of a garment. We have the concept of food that represents something which has to be completely limited and minute and particular to the person. You have to be able to digest it and take it inside of yourself. Then you have a garment which you wrap yourself around the garment, but you're meant to have it according to your size. Then you have a house. But in a house, there's usually not one big hall. You have different rooms. Yes, most houses, a mansion is bigger than a sukkah. But people have sukkahs that are bigger than any room in their house. And then you have congregations that have sukkahs. Huge sukkahs. You know, if you go to Bobiv in Borough Park, I used to live in Borough Park, the Bobiv sukkah was renowned. People came to visit the Bobiv sukkah. So a sukkah could be gigantic. So it's bigger than a bayis. We call levushim is usually called makif, a makif hakorev, and a bayis is called a makif harochik. But a sukkah is ruim kol Yisrael leishav b'sukkah achas. We don't say that about a bayis. We say about a sukkah that all of Israel could be included in one sukkah. In other words, it encompasses all types, all kinds, and that's the idea of sukkahs, the idea of achdus. And the mitzvah of sukkah is greater than the mitzvah of the daled minim. I don't want to get into that right now. But of course, the 4 kinds also represents 4 different types of Jews. We're not going to get into it now, but that covers every sort of Jew. And we need to bring the 4 kinds all together, the lulav, the esrog, the aravis. If we're missing any one of them, or the adasim, then the whole thing is not kosher. So we see this is explained in many talks and many memorim, how the holiday of Sukkot represents Achdus and Avos Yisrael, and in a certain sense, in a greater way, in a deeper way than Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because over there, it's not life as we know it. It's not Teishu Kein Teduru. It's an Achdus which comes together because we have to act like angels. We're going out of ourselves, out of our norm. But where do we sit down as normal people, living, eating, breathing, and enjoying ourselves? That's Chag HaSukkos, life as we know it generally. And in that environment, we're all hugging and beautiful, getting along one with the other. I want to finish with a story, which to me is very relevant and brings out very, very well this connection to Sukkos. There's a Rabbi Chaim Citrin who lives in Los Angeles, and his parents were not Lubavitchers, and he became close to Lubavitch, and he went to Lubavitch Yeshiva. He's an American boy, and by the time he was finished high school, he was like a regular Hasidic Bacha who didn't want to go to college. But his parents wanted him to go to college very, very much. By now, Chaim Sitrin already had a connection to the Rebbe. He went into Yechidus already before. He was a regular Bacha. But this was a very, very difficult situation with his parents who were insisting that he should go to college. Meanwhile, to placate his parents a bit, he registered at Brooklyn College, and he also took a test for state scholarship, and he was awarded, he won the state scholarship. Meanwhile, he was working on trying to get a Yechidus with the Rebbe urgently to convince his parents to forget about the college, to do what was the right thing for him to do, which was to learn more in yeshiva. So he went to the office, the maskiros, to try to get an appointment to Yechidus with the Rebbe for himself and his parents, and he was told there's a 6 months wait. But he couldn't wait that long. It was very, very urgent, and it was a very difficult situation at the home with the parents who very, very strongly wanted him to go to college, and he didn't. So he wrote a letter to the Rebbe about his situation, which is highly unusual. It's the first time I heard about a story where a bacher was told that he's going to have to wait 6 months for Yechidus, and he wrote a letter to the Rebbe explaining his situation, and shortly after he was notified by the maskiros that he should come right away with his parents. So, I don't know, the next night or something, he came with his parents to the Rebbe, and they had Yechidus. And the Rebbe was saying to the parents that it's not so good for the boy, Chaim Sitrin, to go to college. So the mother, who was a straightforward person, asked the Rebbe, but you went to college. So the Rebbe answered, I was much older than him, and at that age, it doesn't have such a profound impact, doesn't make such an impression. But at his age, he's young, he's much younger than I was, he needs to study full-time Torah studies in yeshiva for at least 2 years. So then the mother said, but he will lose the scholarship. So the Rebbe says, don't worry, if he loses the scholarship, I'll pay for his education, if need be. If he still wants it, that means after 2 years of studying yeshiva. Okay, so then Chaim Sitrin's mother was quiet, and she gave in. And there was a pause, and the Rebbe looks at her and says, I want you to smile. When the Rebbe said that, it was such a surprise for the mother that she smiled. She couldn't help it but smile. And then the Rebbe said, now that you're smiling, we can conclude the meeting. I want people to be happy when they leave here. How amazing is this story? On so many levels. First of all, I'm thinking to myself, I work in yeshiva. So this is the story of the Rebbe getting involved in the life of a bacher in yeshiva at the most, particular level. Imagine you have an army and you have captain, lieutenants, majors, colonels, generals, 5-star general, chief of staff, and then like the king. Here's a situation where this is a bacher, he has teachers, he has principals, and the Rebbe himself is responding to the urgency of the situation. The bacher wrote, he has a problem, he needs Yechidus right away. And here's the Rebbe meeting with statesmen, meeting with prime ministers, etc. But a bacher writes to the Rebbe and says, I need a meeting right away. And the Rebbe makes a meeting right away. And second of all, how the Rebbe tells his mother, I want people to be happy when they leave here. So I give you a bracha. I give myself a bracha. Every person we ever encounter, and especially this Sukkos, you should think to yourself, I want people to be happy when they leave here, when they leave my sukkah, when they leave my house, when they leave me, period. Every single time I meet somebody, I should think to myself, I want that person to be happy. So l'chaim, we have to make resolutions of Ahavas Yisrael, whether because of the first pshat in Rashi, that Barcheinu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad, us being together, HaBerachah, will bring blessings. So that means for our benefit, obviously, but also because this brings nachas to Avinu Sheb'Shamayim. Or for the second aspect, if you consider yourself someone who is Kabbalas El Malchus Shemayim, you're Kabbalas Elnik, and to you it's very important to always do what the Eibishter wants. So you should know if you have discord or disunity with another citizen, with another Yid, another Ben Avram Yitzchak Yankiv, so you just caused Hashem's Malchus to be diminished. Hashem is not a melech. If we're not united, wow. Look how careful you have to be about Malucha. So the Eibishter should help that we should increase in Avos Yisrael, including in Avos Chinam, and that Sukkos will bring about the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, Sukkos Dover and Nifeles, Yokim Lanu and Sukkos Dover and Nifeles, the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, take of Miad Mamish. Posting from the Rebbe Shchuna, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in the Rebbe's Shchuna. Good Yontiv, good Yontiv.